All right, so let's dive into the world of Polestar, this Swedish EV maker that's been generating some serious buzz lately. But is it all hype, or are they the real deal? That's what we're here to uncover today, and more specifically, you want to know, is Polestar a good investment opportunity? We've got a ton of research lined up, reports, analysis, the works, all seen through the lens of, you guessed it, Warren Buffett's value investing principles.
That's right, and we should be upfront right away. The market isn't exactly head over heels for Polestar at the moment. Their stock price has been taking a hit, analysts aren't exactly singing their praises, and investors are getting a bit, well, skittish. But before anyone jumps ship, we need to pop the hood and understand what's really going on.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is Polestar trying to be in this whole EV landscape?
Think premium, think electric, think like Scandinavian, cool. They're jointly owned by Volvo and Geely, which explains the sleek design and that whole sustainability focus they've got going on. Their big goal is to grab a chunk of that luxury car market, aiming for 5 distinct models by 2025.
Ambitious for sure, but the EV market's already pretty crowded, right? I mean, they're not exactly entering a wide open field here.
Tell me about it. The EV market is projected to be worth over $6 trillion. By 2035, it's absolutely exploding. Everyone's trying to get a piece of the pie, from Tesla to the more traditional automakers like Volkswagen, GM, the whole gang's here. But here's the kicker. Polestar sales actually surged by a massive 185% in 2021. That's even faster than Tesla's growth in that same year.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. I'm guessing all those government incentives and the push for, green transportation are giving them a nice boost.
Absolutely. But let's not forget there are some speed bumps on this road to EV domination. Things like the high upfront costs for anyone looking to buy one, the fact that charging infrastructure still isn't everywhere, and the constant struggle to create those powerful batteries without breaking the bank. Those are all very real challenges.
So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, a lot of potential, but some hurdles to clear. Speaking of clearing hurdles, who's actually steering the Polestar ship through all of this?
That would be their CEO, Michael Loschler. He came on board late 2024. He's got a pretty impressive resume, having worked at companies like Nikola, VinFast, and Opel. Seems like he's pretty familiar with this whole car-making business.
Yeah, experience is definitely a good thing,
Yeah.
but has it been all smooth sailing for Polestar? Have they hit any, roadblocks along the way?
Well, it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows, let's put it that way.
Right.
They've dealt with some production delays, a bit of shuffling around in the leadership, even some financial restatements that raise some eyebrows. Not exactly the kind of things that inspire confidence, right?
Yeah, those are definitely some red flags. But have they taken any steps to, I don't know, get things back on track?
They're not just sitting around twiddling their thumbs, that's for sure. They've been restructuring, they've secured more funding, they even trimmed down their staff to become more streamlined. Early 2024 saw some big changes, too. Winfried Vollen stepped in as board chair, and Per Ansgar took the reins as CFO. So they're definitely making some moves to, try and stabilize things.
Sounds like they're trying to right the ship, at least. What's the end game here, though? Where do they see themselves in, say, 5 years?
Their big, ambitious goal is to hit that cash flow break-even point by 2025. Now, for those who aren't fluent in finance speak, that basically means they want their incoming cash flow to equal what's going out. No more bleeding money, in other words.
That's a pretty big target, especially considering all the challenges we've talked about already. It does sound like they're trying to be open about their.
Yeah, for sure. They've been giving regular updates on their progress, laying out their plans, even publishing those detailed sustainability reports. They seem to understand that keeping investors in the loop is, well, kind of important.
Transparency is key, for sure. All right, let's get down to brass tacks here. What does the financial picture actually look like for Polestar right now?
Well, their market cap is sitting at $2.3 billion, but there are a few warning lights flashing on the dashboard. Their price-to-earnings ratio is negative, revenue's actually shrinking, and their profit margins are, well, in the red. And to top it off, they're not generating positive free cash flow yet.
Okay, so not exactly painting a pretty picture with those numbers. What about debt? That debt-to-equity ratio of negative 214.8% is, well, kind of alarming, isn't it?
It's definitely a valid concern, yeah. It indicates they're relying heavily on borrowed money to keep the lights on, basically. Then there's the return on invested capital, or ROIC, as the cool kids call it, which is also negative. That means they're not generating returns that exceed the cost of their capital, which is not ideal.
So it's like they're spending $1 to earn just 50 cents.
Yeah.
Not exactly a sustainable business model in the long run.
Exactly, and that's a major concern for anyone looking at Polestar from that, value investing perspective.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, but this deep dive's far from over. We've looked at Polestar's goals, the competitive landscape, the people running the show, and their, let's say, less than stellar financials. But there's still plenty more to uncover. So we've dug into their financials, and, well, they're definitely not winning any beauty contests at the moment. But numbers only tell one side of the story, right? Now is time to get a feel for the overall vibe. What's the market saying about Polestar?
Well, if we're looking at market beats market rank, it's not exactly glowing praise. They've put Polestar above just 23% of the companies they analyze, which, isn't exactly inspiring.
Ouch, yeah, that's got to hurt a bit. So what's behind this, I don't know, lack of enthusiasm?
Well, remember those delayed earnings reports and that growing mountain of debt we talked about? Those haven't done them any favors. Investors are getting a bit spooked. And we're seeing this surge in short interest in Polestar's stock, which basically means people are betting against them.
So the market's a little bit, well, skeptical, to say the least. But is there any chance Polestar could benefit from, I don't know, like a halo effect? If other EV makers are doing really well, could some of that positive energy rub off on them?
It's definitely possible, yeah. Good news from competitors like Rivian, for example, who've had a string of positive announcements lately, can actually lift the entire EV sector. Investor psychology is a funny thing. Sometimes it's not just about how a company is performing individually, but how the whole industry is perceived.
So a rising tide could lift all boats, even if one of them has a few leaks. Okay, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about who's actually pulling the strings behind the scenes. What's the ownership structure like at Polestar?
It's pretty concentrated, actually. The majority shareholders are their parent companies, Geely Holding and Volvo Cars. So institutional ownership is relatively low.
Interesting. So it's really those two big players calling the shots. Have there been any, I don't know, interesting moves by insiders, like big stock buys or sells that might hint at how confident they are?
Not really. Insider activity's been pretty quiet lately. No big buying or selling sprees to report. They're keeping their cards pretty close to their chests for now.
All right, so the insiders aren't giving us any hints just yet. Well, let's put on our analyst hats for a minute and do a proper risk assessment. Time to the classic SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the whole shebang.
Always love a good SWOT analysis. So let's start with the positives. What are Polestar's biggest strengths? Where do they shine?
Well, their connection to Volvo is a huge plus, right? Volvo has that long-standing reputation for safety, reliability, quality. Those are some valuable associations.
Absolutely. And that whole Scandinavian design thing they've got going on, the sleekness, the minimalism, the sustainability, that definitely appeals to a certain type of buyer. And let's not forget their tech, their integration of Google's Android Automotive OS is pretty cutting edge.
So brand recognition, design appeal, and advanced tech, those are all in their corner. Some pretty good weapons to have in the EV battle. But let's be real, every company has its weaknesses. Where does Polestar fall short?
One big one that sticks out is their limited production capacity. They're relying heavily on contract manufacturing, which makes it tough to really control quality and scale up quickly. And those high production costs are definitely eating into their profits.
Yeah, it's hard to compete on price when your costs are so high. And even with those cool cars, have they really nailed that brand awareness? Do people instantly think Polestar when they think EV?
That's a good point. They haven't quite reached that same level of, recognition and market share at some of the big players. It's a crowded market, and it's tough to stand out.
All right, so production capacity, costs, and brand awareness, those are definitely challenges they need to tackle. But let's flip the script. What about opportunities? What are some potential doors that Polestar could walk through to really thrive?
Well, the global EV market is basically their oyster, right? It's growing like crazy, and that demand for sustainable transportation is only going up. They could also explore new markets, especially in areas that are really embracing EVs.
Yeah, makes sense. Go where the excitement is. And what about that potential for revenue from CO2 credit sales? I feel like that's a pretty hot topic these days.
Absolutely, that could be a very lucrative revenue stream for them. Now, we can't ignore the threats, gotta be realistic here. What could potentially derail Polestar's electric dreams?
Well, the competition is fierce. There's no way around that. They're up against Tesla, which is like the giant in the room, plus all those traditional car makers who are now jumping on the EV bandwagon. It's a tough battle out there.
And it's constantly changing. That rapid pace of technological innovation means Polestar can't afford to fall behind. They have to stay ahead of the curve or risk becoming, well, obsolete.
Right. What's cool today might be old news tomorrow. And what about regulations? Any potential policy changes or curveballs coming their way? Government regulations and policies are always in flux. It adds a whole other layer of complexity. Any sudden shifts could really mess with their plans.
And I bet supply chain disruptions and those fluctuating raw material prices are keeping them up at night. Those are headaches no business wants to deal with.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Those are real concerns for any manufacturer, especially in the EV industry where tech plays such a big role.
All right, so we've done a deep dive on Polestar's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the whole SWOT analysis laid out. So where do we go from here?
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent this episode really getting to know Polestar. From their, that sleek Scandinavian design to those ambitious goals they've set for themselves in this booming EV market. We've seen their strengths, we've talked about their weaknesses, and we've looked at that fierce competition they're facing. But the big question still remains, is Polestar a smart investment? Or are they headed for a crash landing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And after all this, after our deep dive into their business, their management team, those financials, market sentiment, and all those risk factors, it's time to put them to the ultimate test. The Warren Buffett test. Would the Oracle of Omaha see value in Polestar?
Okay, lay it on me. Would Buffett be adding Polestar to his portfolio? Or would he be like, nope, not for me?
Well, let's use his tried and true principles to figure this out. He looks for companies with what he calls a durable competitive advantage, something that really sets them apart and protects their profits over the long haul. He wants to see a solid track record of profitability, not just promises of future success. And he really values those management teams that are skilled at using capital wisely and creating value for shareholders.
So how does Polestar measure up against those benchmarks? Are they checking all the boxes?
Well, they definitely have some appealing qualities, like that connection to Volvo we talked about and their commitment to sustainability. But those might not be enough to create that unshakable competitive advantage that Buffett looks for. Remember, the EV market is incredibly competitive, with some real heavy hitters already calling the shots.
Right. It's not enough to be a good company. They have to be exceptional. They have to be able to outmaneuver the competition. And what about that old profitability thing? Have they been, consistently delivering for investors?
That's where things get a little shaky. Their financials, as we discussed, have been less than impressive. Declining revenues, those negative profit margins, and that reliance on debt are all red flags for a value investor like Buffett. He prefers companies that generate consistent profits and have a strong, financial foundation.
So they've got the style, they've got that sustainability angle,
Yep.
but they're missing that financial strength and consistent profitability that would make Buffett open up his wallet.
Pretty much, yeah. Polestar might be attractive to investors who are really bullish on the long-term growth of the EV market and believe they can overcome those current challenges. But for those looking for that classic, Buffett-style value investment, Polestar probably wouldn't make the cut. It's just not a screaming bargain at this point.
It's a really interesting case study for sure. Polestar is a company with a clear vision and some real strengths, but they've got some serious work to do if they want to convince those seasoned investors like Warren Buffett that they're a sure thing.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see how they adapt, how they innovate, and how they navigate all those challenges ahead.
Yeah.
Only time will tell if they can truly become, a star in that EV universe.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Polestar. Hopefully this analysis has given you a better understanding of their business, their potential, and those risks that are out there.
And remember, this is just one piece of the puzzle. Always do your own research, your own due diligence before making any investment decisions.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are fascinated by this whole EV world, we've got something special coming up. Our next deep dive will be a head-to-head comparison of Polestar and their closest competitor, Lucid Motors. It's a battle of the luxury EV makers, and we'll be breaking down their strategies, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their potential to see who comes out on top.
It's going to be an electrifying showdown, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it.
And if you're looking for even more in-depth financial analysis, head over to the Stock Analytics AI YouTube channel. We've got tons of content to help you navigate the world of investing.
And one last thing, folks, all the research and AI we use in putting these deep dives together are purely for informational purposes. We're not financial advisors, so please don't consider this investment advice. Always talk to a qualified professional before making any financial decisions.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the world of business and finance.